It's the best day of the week. It's the time for the Morning Pitt Mailbag here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com, where we take questions from all the Pitt fans about everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. Everything you want to know about, you ask the questions, and we answer as many as we can here on the Friday edition of the Morning Pitt. You know how it works. We take the questions throughout the week on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. And then we answer a bunch here on the Friday episode of the Morning Pitt. I don't really want to waste any time. We got some great questions this week. We got a few to wrap up from last week and then some great questions this week. Looking forward to diving into. So let's get it started. Morning Pitt Mailbag here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, there's no need to put the ramble and preamble. We can jump right into it and get your questions rolling here on the Morning Pitt Mailbag. Of course, what we always ask you to do, like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have our Morning Pitt videos Monday through Friday, our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night. We have post-game shows, press conferences, interviews, all those different kinds of things. Lots of video content for you right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And the best way to make sure you never miss any of it is to subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and then you won't miss any video content. Of course, remember to get all the Pitt coverage at Panther-Lair.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. You find everything you need, Pitt football, basketball, recruiting, transfer portal, everything else, Panther-Lair.com. And of course, you can find us on the 247 Sports Network, where we have our message boards where Pitt fans gather to talk about Pitt sports. It's the best online community of Pitt sports fans you're going to find, Panther-Lair.com, and the message boards are where we take these questions every week, so let's jump into it. First question. We had some left over from last week. Let me find where we left off. Let's see. H2P Falbert says, with all the players coming and going lately, are there any former players you've kept in contact with after their time at Pitt? Not so much. If you mean like guys who recently transferred, not so much. You know, maybe cross paths every now and then, maybe reach out, say, hey, good luck, that kind of thing. It's former players. It's guys who hung around for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and then they come back for a game or something. You see them on the sideline. Yeah, you say hello. I would say that we have sort of a unique situation here with what we do at Panther-Lair.com and how we cover Pitt sports, because we don't just start covering these guys or talking to these guys or building relationships with these guys when they get to Pitt as freshmen. We're talking to them when they're sophomores in high school and juniors in high school and seniors in high school. We know them since then. And so I think we're sort of uniquely positioned to have interesting insight on these guys, but it also, hey, I know you. I've been seeing you at camps since I went to Pitt's camp as a junior or sophomore or something like that. And so there are those connections. Now, when guys don't stick around for 4 years, you don't build those things quite as much, but it is funny to watch as, it's a funny sort of cycle as you watch players come in. High school guys at a certain point, they get kind of big time. And they start big timing everybody asking for media requests. They're too good for interviews and stuff. And then they get to college and they sort of feel like a little guy again. And they get really nervous at the podium and all that sort of stuff. And then as time goes on, for the guys who stick around, they get more and more comfortable. They get to recognize you. They know you. And they get more comfortable with themselves. They get more comfortable at the podium. And they get more comfortable just, hey, you're a guy who's at practice every day. You know what I mean? And so they recognize you and they know you, and they know that you sort of know about the team, that you're not just like dropping in, every now and then. I mean, there's some familiarity there. So I'm sure when Gavin Bartholomew comes back to a game next season, or if I run into Kenny Pickett on the sidelines, or one of these guys who's been around for a while, some of the O-linemen who have played for a while, you say hello because, they went through their years at Pitt, but you were there too. You didn't see all of it. You didn't put in the work that they put in, but they know you were there and you were around. And so, yeah, there are some relationships like that. But as far as guys who transfer, like I'm not, texting with Bengali Kamara every night or something like that, if that's what you mean. Big Husky 34 says, in the transfer era, who at Pitt have you thought made a wise decision to leave and had it pay off? I think if you're thinking about guys who did well after they transferred from Pitt, it would be guys who transferred down. Obviously, I think Jordan Addison did well. Solomon DeShields played a little bit at Texas A&M. DeAndre Jules played a bit at South Carolina. But it's guys who transferred down. You know, I mean, I think about like Khalil Anderson at East Tennessee State or wherever he ended up. He did well. Aiden Henningham went to Albany State, I think, in Georgia, D2 or maybe 1AA. I forget. But he did well there. You know, Judson Tallender went to Akron and did well, played all the time. You know, Stephon Hall went to Youngstown State and was a starter. You know, and these guys left because they wanted an opportunity for playing time. They left because they wanted to, you know, get a shot to get on the field. And for whatever reason, one reason or another, they didn't feel like they were going to get it here. And so they left. They found a school where they could play, and they did. And that doesn't work out for all of them, but it worked out for some of those guys. I feel like Izzy Polk played a decent amount at Akron last year. You know, but varying guys have had varying experiences. Hey, Christian Bear was a starter at Georgia State, I think. I always get Georgia State and Georgia Southern mixed up. I think he went to Georgia State. You know, he was a starter there. So it's, you know, generally the guys who have had success are the guys who have transferred down, the guys who felt like either they were, you know, too far down on the depth chart or maybe, you know, reevaluated what level they should be playing at, which it takes a lot of, I mean, you got to have that level of self-awareness. I think there's a lot of maturity in that to say, you know what, I actually should go to a G5 school or an FCS school or a D2 school where I'm going to have an opportunity to play. Maybe I'm not really at this level right now, you know, and I need to go somewhere that I can get to that level. So, you know, credit to those guys for making that decision and making that move. And for a number of them, like I mentioned, you know, I think it paid off for them. They did well. Atwood409, the last question from last week, says, what grade do you give Pat Narduzzi and company from a portal standpoint, both retention and addition from December to now? I give them a B+. They kept all the most important guys, and the biggest losses were a guy who was never going to be happy at Pitt and another guy they could replace fairly easily. I would have given them an A if they would have gotten Hakeem Williams and Rocco Spindler. I'm guessing when you talk about the guys they lost, the guy who was never going to be happy at Pitt, I'm guessing you mean Sincere Edwards and a guy who could replace very easily being Rylan Gandy. You know, I mean, I think, I would tend to agree with that. B+ feels pretty fair. There maybe wasn't a big kind of, you know, a highlight big time ad, you know, from the transfer portal that you're going to look at and be like, wow, that guy is going to really put them over the top. But I'm not sure if Pitt is ever really going to swim in those waters, you know, to get that big time ad. I guess we probably would have talked about Hakeem Williams that way, but I don't know if he would have been that. Maybe Rocco Spindler could have been that. You know, Sincere Edwards and Rylan Gandy were the two starters. They lost the two guys that were the biggest losses, and I think Edwards probably stands out as the biggest loss out of that group. But then when I look at what they brought in, and I don't necessarily say this, you know, to compare and contrast with Sincere Edwards. I think he's going to be really good. I think he was good last year, and he was only going to get better. But I think, you know, if I look at the addition side of that, you know, where we talked about what they needed the most, right? And when we talked about this from the time the season ended, we talked about it before the season even ended. They needed offensive linemen and they needed defensive ends, and they brought in 3 offensive linemen, all with you know, plenty of experience, and some of them, you know, long starting experience, and all of them had been on the field a lot. And they brought in 3 defensive ends who seem like they'll be a better fit for Pitt in 2025 than last year's transfer defensive ends were a fit for Pitt in 2024. And so I feel like they really addressed their needs. I feel like they got what they needed to get, which was veteran offensive linemen and some defensive ends who might be able to make an impact. And so I think they did well with what they added. And they also obviously addressed the wide receiver room quite a bit with a bunch of transfers there. And then they really kind of filled in some holes, and even some holes that I might not have even called holes. You know, they made the cornerback position stronger. I think they made the safety position stronger. You know, they added a tight end because they really needed to add a tight end. But I think when you look at it, like, they needed offensive linemen and defensive ends, and they got that. So I give them a pretty high grade. I think a B+ feels fair, just because, like I said, there wasn't that big, flashy, showstopper type of addition. But they got really solid ads at all the spots where they needed to add guys. So I give them I think a B+ would work pretty well for me as well. I could agree with that if you had just, you know, if they'd gotten that big time transfer edition, maybe I could go up to an A. But I think a B plus feels really fair. All right, questions from this week. We got some good ones here. TPKFA_JD says, off-season topic, stack or rank the wide receiver room and guess their impact next season. Something makes me think Kateris Hicks might catch a good number of balls. Kenny Johnson, Raphael Williams, Sincere Lee, Blue Hicks, Tyreek Robinson, Zion Fowler-El, Deuce Spann, Tony Kinsler, Bryce Yates, and Cam Sapp. Is that all 10? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep. 10 scholarship wide receivers. Rank them and guess their impact next season. Look, Kenny Johnson's got to be the number one wide receiver. I think this whole thing is built for Kenny Johnson to be the number one wide receiver. I think he's got the talent to be a number one wide receiver at Pitt. He needs the targets. He needs the opportunity, which he didn't get the last couple of years. Now, he's got to also make the most of the opportunity. So Kenny Johnson's got to be number one on this list. I think what's really interesting is who's number two. And who's going to end up being number two in terms of receptions, yards, and touchdowns. Raphael Williams, sorry about that. I didn't mean to sniff my nose right in the microphone. I think I just did it again. I tried to mute the microphone so you didn't have to hear that, but sorry. Raphael Williams was the number two, ended up being effectively the number two last year. I don't know that he retains that role or resumes that role this year. I think I had questions about Kateris Hicks. I didn't know what to expect out of him. Jim and I talked about this on the live stream on Wednesday night. I didn't really know what to expect out of him. And I kind of was a little bit skeptical. And while I'll be the first to say you should not overreact to what guys do in the spring game, the reality is he made a pretty big play in the spring game where he showed maybe what he can do. I think he's a dark horse candidate to be the number two receiver here. I don't know if he'll end up getting it, but I think he's a dark horse candidate. Williams, Raphael Williams and Sincere Lee are going to be involved, but they were both hurt and missed all of spring camp. Deuce Spann is a really interesting guy. Lots of positive reviews about him coming out of spring camp. Lots of people talking about how good he was. He was another guy I was skeptical about. I know we just talked about transfers and transfer additions. I mentioned the wide receivers, but I was skeptical about a couple of these guys. There's not a lot on the resume for Blue Hicks. And there's even less on the resume for Deuce Spann, despite the fact that he's been in college like 3 times as long as Blue Hicks. But I was skeptical about both of those guys because you just don't know what you're going to get. You would think a guy like Deuce Spann with his measurables, his size and his speed would have made a bigger impact by now, but he hasn't. And so I can't go too far down the road of saying I have really high expectations for Deuce Spann. But if they figured something out with him, if they found the way to use him, if they found a way to unlock the talent that should be tied to those intangibles, well, then he could have a really big year. The two sort of forgotten guys here, Tyreek Robinson and Zion Fowler-El, I don't know. Like they liked Robinson enough to use him last year and burn his red shirt. Does that translate into being a top 5 receiver this year? I'm not sure. I think, Johnson, Williams, Lee, Hicks, Spann is probably your top 5, but Robinson, Fowler-El, and then the 3 freshmen, Tony Kinsler and Bryce Yates and Cam Sapp. I mean, they've all shown flashes. I mean, the 3 freshmen were good in spring, and they all were here. Which is huge. I mean, if you can get freshmen on campus for spring camp, that's going to give them a leg up on being ready to contribute in the fall. So I can't rule them out. I guess the best thing I would say is I feel like it's kind of wide open after Kenny Johnson. It's Kenny Johnson, and then it's everybody else, and everybody else, those other 9 guys have to sort out who's numbers 2 through 5 or 2 through 6. So I guess I'm not answering your question. Raphael Williams and Sincere Lee are going to be heavily involved as long as they're healthy. Hicks and Spann are going to get an opportunity, and then we'll see what shakes out with the 2, returning upperclassmen and the 3 freshmen. Marshall Dawes says, I know that in an ideal world, Pitt would have a billionaire write them a blank check, and that this is going to change after the settlement, but what do you think is an ideal/reasonable amount of money the football team and basketball team would need to be competitive year to year? It's an interesting question. And you're right, it's going to change after the House settlement, once we get revenue sharing, and once we really get a sense of how NIL is going to factor into the money, like how NIL is going to be sort of accounted for and how it's going to operate on top of the house, the revenue sharing this side of the house settlement. The hardest thing about answering this question, what does the football team need? What does the basketball team need to be competitive year to year? Is that the number keeps changing. Like a year ago, I think somebody would have said, well, you need $5 million for the football team, and you need $1 or $2 million for the basketball team. Well, that was a year ago or 2 years ago. This year that's not the numbers. The numbers are much higher. The numbers are significantly higher. Basketball is probably looking at $5 million or more that you would need to really build a competitive team, and probably more than that to really be competitive at the upper echelons. And so it's hard to say, hey, here's a number that you're going to need to build a competitive football team and a competitive men's basketball team. And it's hard to say that just because the numbers keep moving. The amount that these guys are asking for, the amount that these guys are getting, keeps shifting, keeps changing. And you can't put a finger on it. You can't nail it down anywhere. You can't even nail it down from the winter portal window to the spring portal window for football, because it changes in there. It's all over the place. And every year the numbers have gone up. Every year it just keeps changing. And so I can't sit here and tell you, well, the football team needs $10 million. They might. $10 million would have done them really well this year. But is that going to do them really well next year? And how's it going to look when we get into the context of the house settlement? So it's kind of all over the place. That answer is all over the place, but it's because there is no stability. And that's why you have this situation where players, their market value or their worth, they are worth whatever the market is willing to pay them. You know what I mean? Like you look at a guy and be like, well, that guy's not that good. He hasn't been a starter. They're bringing him in to be a backup. Hey, he can't be worth that much. Oh, look, they're giving him $350,000. Well, I guess he's worth $350,000 now. The school that let him go wouldn't give him $75,000, and he goes to a school that's going to give him $350,000. Because if somebody's willing to give it to you, you take it. And so the market determines the value. You are worth whatever somebody's willing to pay you. So that's just constantly shifting and always moving around. And so it's hard to say there's some number that you need. Right now, the number is $20.5 million. Of revenue sharing that's going to go to all the sports combined. Beyond that, no idea. Let's see. Spenges says, with a seemingly talented and deep for Bell's system quarterback room, Desmond Reed and Kenny Johnson returning, and a rebuilt and experienced offensive line, will this offense be better than the Walt Harris Tyler Palco offense, which won the Big East and went to the Fiesta Bowl? Let me get my media guide. I just want to see. There's a page that they have in the media guide that lists year by year. Let's see if I can find it quickly. Not waste too much time here. They list year by year, like points and yardage and all that kind of stuff. And I want to find what that 2004 team did, because my instinct, my gut reaction is no, it won't be better than that. And it's no disrespect to Cade Bell, but Walt Harris is really good. That's my first. Where's that page? I'm not going to find it, I'm sure, because I'm looking for it. Let's see here. Wait, I got one last spot that I'm going to look. I should have that. I should have it open to that page at all times anyway, but I don't. Oh well. It doesn't really matter. Wait, there's one other place. No, that's a current team. Oh, there it is. Hey, I knew I could find it. 2004. Pitt averaged. Where's the points per game? There it is. 27.1 points per game in 2004. So, and they averaged about 357 yards per game. Those numbers don't sound eye-popping, but it was 2004. Could this team average better than 27 points per game? What did they average last year? I should know this off the top of my head. This is good. I should have actually looked at this question before I sat down so I could, have this information in front of me and be ready. Maybe I'll edit this all out and it'll just sound like I knew all this stuff off the top of my head. But if Pitt's stats website ever loads, so they averaged 33 points per game, so 6 points per game more last year than they averaged in 2004. So I guess in terms of productivity, sure, they should average more. I guess I take back what I was going to say, that no, they're not going to be better than Walt Harris, but last year they were better than Walt Harris. At least, Walt Harris's 2004 team, they were better than that team in terms of scoring. So there you go. They're already there. J-Town Panther Fan 89 says, is the football coaching staff placing more of a focus on finalizing official visits, or are there still transfer targets they're looking to bring in? That's a good question. They're out on the road recruiting. They're working on high school guys, seniors to be and juniors to be, and even some of the younger guys. They're offering new scholarships. They're gearing up for June. I don't think they're entirely done. I don't think they've closed the book on transfers. I think there's a lot of guys that are still out there available in the portal. They're probably taking their time with it and being selective. Is there anybody that we really want or really need? I wouldn't be surprised if they add another one or two. And that's not like a wink type of thing. I think a lot of the focus right now, at least for the assistant coaches, they're on the road recruiting in high schools. Back at the headquarters, Pat Narduzzi and the recruiting staff and all those guys, they very well are, they're probably looking at some transfer guys, keeping an eye on things. But yeah, by and large, the focus is on that 2026 recruiting class, trying to get those guys in line, ready for the official visits and, offering new guys and doing all the recruiting stuff. So it's kind of where I see them being right now. Let's see if we got one more question here to throw in. Oh, yeah. I was going to answer this one. Jay Lazinger says, do you think we have a chance to win 8 games this year? The schedule is rough with Louisville, Notre Dame, and Miami all looking like ranked teams at home, road games at Georgia Tech, Florida State, and West Virginia. I think maybe we can get there with a bowl win. The basic question, is there a chance to win 8 games? Yeah, of course. There's a chance. There's a chance to win 8 games. Duquesne, Central Michigan, those should be wins for you. What's that? And then, but you're right. You have at West Virginia, and Notre Dame kind of wraps up the non-conference schedule. So you have a tough non-conference. I don't know enough about these teams right now. As I'm looking through this list, I'm like, Louisville, I'm just guessing Jeff Brom will do another good job. I mean, that's just what he does. Boston College, probably be Boston College, although they beat Pitt a bunch of times. That's what they do. Syracuse is Syracuse. Stanford doesn't look very good. Georgia Tech, I don't know. Maybe they're heading in the right direction. It's hard for me to judge this right now. But do they have a chance to win 8 games? Yeah, they should. I think they're good enough to win 8. And maybe not need a bowl game to get there. I think they're good enough to be an 8-4 team. On talent, I think they're good enough to be an 8-4 team. So, yes, they do have a chance to win 8. Will they win 8? I don't know. Will they win more? I don't know. Do they have a chance to win more if the ball bounces their way? Which is, I think you get beyond 8, you start counting on the ball bouncing your way to get 9, 10, or whatever. So, to your question, do they have a chance to win 8? Yes. And that seems like a good spot to leave it here as we head into the weekend. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for watching all week. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, go check out the website Panther-Lair.com so you never miss any of our Pitt content, or right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, any of our Pitt video content. Yep. Thanks for watching this week, though. I appreciate it. I hope you've had a great week. I hope you have a great Friday. Enjoy your weekend, and we will be back with you on Monday morning for another exciting edition of the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.